Cool. Awesome. Well, welcome this morning to Foiling Week 2020 and our Gurrit Forum. We are on our second, actually maybe fourth, live discussion and panel discussion. Today's discussion is just about the evolution of a new class, which is the AC75. In Foiling Week, we don't really have a distinction between a new version of a A-class catamaran or a new beach foiler or something like that. It's just a new foiler and a new design challenge. But in the world of sport, the new AC75s are a big deal. After two America's Cups in catamarans, they are now back in monohulls when New Zealand won the America's Cup in 2017 in Bermuda. Most of you kind of know that. So today we're going to be talking to designers from two of the teams. We're having some technical challenges getting on from Martin Fisher from Luna Rossa and Horacio Carabelli, also from Luna Rossa. So they're going to keep trying. They can see us, which might be a little frustrating right now. Martin Fisher is in New Caledonia. And Dan Bernasconi is here from Team New Zealand. It is in the evening in Auckland, or wherever you are, Dan.
Yeah, I'm in Auckland.
Awesome. And I just want to introduce myself. I am Chris Museler. I am the moderator of the Gurrit Forum. And my partners in Lago de Garda this morning are Bruno Gentoli, who's up in whatever side of your screen, and Andrew Pindar, my co-host. And so we're going to get started here. And before I fully get started, Andrew, I always like to hear from the person with white hair in the room. when we look at the new AC75 and we have the top designers and engineers in the world here to talk with us about a new rule. You've seen a lot of designs in the world, a lot of America's Cup campaigns. What's your curiosity with these designers in the AC75 right off the bat?
Well, I'm still struggling to cope with how a boat can go quicker than the wind. So for me, the very concept of how these things can possibly work, I was one of the old men cynics. By the way, this isn't grey. This is silver blonde.
Okay, gotcha. We'll get there.
But for me, it's absolutely fascinating. And for once, for the doubts that I had, then to see these boats now hooning around the Hauraki Gulf, then that to me is incredible. And I'm hearing within the yachting industry that there's already application coming in for designs that will be applied to people having big offshore monohulls with this type of thinking behind it. So already we're seeing that trickle down.
Cool. Well, let's get into the designers right now. And Horacio and Martin, if we can figure out any type of smoke signal to get information from you guys or comments, we'll have Bruno send them our way. So Dan, as the lone person we can see and hear at the moment, I know you've done some commentary in terms of the evolution of this design rule. One thing I do know from American designer Doug Peterson, people commented that he was able to find the sweet spot of a design rule kind of quicker than most people. For yourself, with such a new rule, where'd your mind first go to when you had this rule come to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting challenge because, as you say, it's completely new. We could apply a lot of what we'd learned in previous cups and a lot of the tools and technologies. As you've probably heard lots of times, we really invested in our simulation capability through the last two cups, in particular in Bermuda, using a simulator. And really all of our design now is driven in performance terms through that simulator. So whereas in going back to Valencia and the ICC before that, you typically ultimately test whether something was faster or not by lining up two boats against each other and having a baseline and comparing against one other yacht. Now we do that almost exclusively on the simulator because we're looking for really small differences in some cases. And the boats are so fast that even if you could practically get two of them lining up against each other. They'd be in very different conditions very soon. So really, we're using the simulation tools, and that's how the class came about. And I don't think it would have got to the stage it did get to without those tools, because we're able to sort of really explore a wide range of concepts and see what would work well. And that we had a few months to do that. Whereas if you were having to build all those prototypes and see what actually worked, you just couldn't have done it in a cup cycle.
That's an awesome comment, actually, that the class almost couldn't come to be without the updated simulations that you were able to do. But that doesn't, I don't know if a simulator tells you if it's actually going to work on the water versus the different versions of it are going to, perform better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But we 100% relied on the simulator telling us it was going to work. I mean, we came out with the concept, announced the concept, came out with the class rule, and a whole lot of constraints around that rule in terms of dimensions, weights, sail areas. And, then there were several cup teams investing hundreds of millions combined to come up with a boat. So it would be pretty embarrassing if the boat couldn't even take off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, for sure, it was quite a relief when we saw the British and the Americans come out with their prototypes and see that it really worked. But, I mean, we had to be pretty confident before that it was going to work.
Right. So it is really new. Before we keep digging into the AC75, that seems like a pretty big deal to me. Are we going to see, like Andrew was saying, with trickle down to other areas, are we going to see yacht design both for recreational or luxury and racing move in that direction? Are we going to see types of boats that come out that we haven't seen before because that they were created on a simulator?
Yeah, I think so. It's a really cool platform for exploring ideas. Mm-hmm. In getting to the AC75, we did explore quite a number of different possible configurations for foiling yachts, foiling monohulls in particular. Yeah. And I mean, I guess ultimately there's kind of a finite set of different types of ways you can combine a sail and some foils. But yeah, I don't think we've explored them all yet.
And what while we're on that topic, what was one of the coolest ideas for a foiling monohull that you didn't use? Can you draw it on a piece of paper or share with us?
I guess the sort of obvious starting point in a way is the existing foiling monohulls, which is a moth.
Right.
And really that's the only sort of widespread non-prototypey foiling monohull that was around at the time. And so, I mean, that's kind of the starting point. And you can draw that up and sort of think how that would scale to a bigger yacht. But it really is something which only works well with where the crew weight is a really significant part of the overall yacht weight. So when the boat itself weighs far more than the crew do, as is the case when you get to a sort of 75-foot yacht, then you really need a different concept.
Right. Well, let's get into the weeds with the AC75. We kind of know the parameters. So hull shape, foils, actually just mainly the horizontal foils, and the sails, the 2-ply mainsail. Of those three areas, hull shape, foil shape, and then the sails themselves, which one is the bigger percentage gain or loss in terms of design? Is it unbalanced?
In terms of actual gain and loss, I mean, it's hard to rate that because the sails are ultimately driving the boat forward, and the foils and the hull Well, the foils are slowing it down. They produce drag, the foils the sails produce drive. The hull, you could probably say somewhere in between, because it's the combination of the hull and sails working together is increasing the efficiency of the sails, but there's the hull on its own is some drag. So, it's two sides of the equation, and you've got to do as good a job as you can on both of those.
Right.
In terms of where we put our effort, I would say it's probably roughly evenly spread between sail shape design, hull shape design, and foil shape design. But having said that, the hull, you can only sort of have two shots at it. Say all the teams have launched their first boat and their second boat. So, we put a huge amount of effort into the shape design of both those boats, but we were done on that months ago because we're committed to building our race boat. And so, from that day, we haven't really given much thought to it, other than, we've got what we've got. So if you look at it over the campaign, I guess there is more effort that goes into the full shapes, the rudder shapes, and the sail shapes, because they're things that you go through more iterations of and you can continue working on to much later in the campaign.
Right. Do you think you, in this, in the final round or version 2 of all this stuff for the AC-75, do you think as observers, like lay people, we will visually see the differences? We can visually see the differences in the hulls very easily, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's not as sexy understanding aerodynamics, going through the air, because it seems pretty nebulous, but it's not. But do you think we'll see more of a visible difference between the sail and the foil, or vice versa, between the boats?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, to the sort of casual observer, the hull shape is the thing which is most obviously different between the teams. It's a huge design space that we've got to work in, and that makes it really cool. You look at the first 4 boats that have come out, and they are very different.
Yeah.
I think maybe there'll be some convergence in the team's second boat, or maybe there won't. I mean, that's going to be really interesting to see. But there are also huge differences in the sails and in the foils. I mean, the sails from, if you just look at the sails from the side of the boat, maybe they all look fairly similar at first glance. They're
in profile,
roughly similar areas. But if you look at how they're controlled, there's a huge difference with booms or no booms, or systems at the top of the main sail, a whole lot of different kind of ways of jib sheeting. So there's a massive difference there. And then in the foils, again, you have to look a little bit closer, but the way that teams are controlling the lift on the foils with flaps, again, it's a completely open playing field on that. So I'm sure, so when we get into the cup, and the TV analysts are looking closely at the foils, and there'll be lots of cameras on the boats and close-ups, I think everyone will start to realize how much variation there is in those areas too.
Cool. Is it true to say that in hydrodynamics, in hydrofoil shapes, that this group of designers, or these teams for this America's Cup, there's no other group of individuals in the world that are advancing that design space more than anyone else? Like, I think I said that kind of funny, but like, basically, are you guys the smartest kids in the room when it comes to hydrofoil shapes right now?
Well, I think the conditions we're optimizing for are pretty specific to our needs. So you quite quickly become experts in your own field.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, we are putting probably more effort than any other campaign to date on foil shape design, where all the yachts are getting close to 50 knots, and when you approach well, when you get over 40 and certainly towards 50, cavitation becomes a huge issue. And so I guess it's an area which hasn't really been optimized that much before. I mean, propellers are designed for sort of supercavitating flows, but aircraft have a different set of problems, but cavitation isn't one of them. So for sort of a sailing yacht, something that's really efficient to work in a straight line and be good at low speeds when you're trying to take off, because that's a massive part of it, but also be able to approach 50 knots is a real challenge, and that's given us a lot to think about.
Cool. I'm about to bring in Andrew with some questions, but I want to ask you, what have you come upon in terms of foil design that you've uncovered maybe that you're really excited about, but that you maybe can't tell us fully? Have you kind of figured out a couple things with hydrofoil shapes and contours and even flap design that you're like, oh, that's it, you know, and but you can't quite tell us everything?
Yeah, we've learned a huge amount since we launched our first foils, and the other teams, our competitors, all launched smaller boats, and I guess had a chance to have a look at those at a smaller scale. We went straight into our first AC75.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably the area that has surprised us most is how complex and how difficult the mechanics of it are.
Mm-hmm.
In the last few cups, the foils have been rigid components. So for the AC72s and the AC50s, they're solid carbon fiber structures with no moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go back to 2007 in Valencia with the ISEC yachts and look at the trim tabs there to go back to when the designers were used to working with mechanisms. And I mean, that's sort of when I was first involved in the America's Cup, and even then it was a challenge getting trim tabs to work well. You could move the trim tab at the top end of it, and you really had very little idea what was going on at the bottom end, whether it was sort of all moving in unison or whether it was twisting horrendously. And sort of later in the campaign, when we got onto installing cameras, which was a huge project back then in 2007, you're sort of absolutely shocked to learn that the bottom isn't moving at all on the boat I was involved with. Yeah, I think you take that forward from boats that were going sort of 10 knots or so to boats that are going 45 knots, and of course the forces scale with the square of the speed. So that trying to develop mechanisms that control those flaps and achieve the shapes that you're trying to achieve is really hard. And we had a lot of experience in designing full shapes, but not so much experience in that mechanics, and that's been a challenge for us.
Gotcha. Wow, that's a surprise to me. But then again, the further away you move from the controlling mechanism, the structure has to, you know, still actuate.
Yeah, exactly.
So can I jump in there then, Chris?
Yeah, go for it, Andrew.
And Dan, you're probably a friend of Paul Larson's. If not, you'll certainly know of his work. And I remember with Paul when he was moving from Sail Rocket 1 to Sail Rocket 2, and people were denying the possibility of dealing with cavitation when he was seeking to break the speed record. Can you explain something? Because I never understood what it was that he overcame when he was living with Helena in a container for years, whilst he was just pursuing something that he believed in. And I've forgotten the name of the design guy who worked with him to be able to get over that cavitation thing. If you could talk a little bit about that, and also whether any of the lessons that Paul went through with Sail Rocket are things that you've been able to make use of, or do you think your competitors have been able to make use of in your designs?
Yeah, I know Paul very well and Helena, so hi to them if they're watching. So yeah, I was involved in that project. I just did the website. He didn't let me anywhere near the design. But yeah, the designer was Malcolm Barnsley, and Chris Hornsey Jones worked a lot on the foils. What the problem they had was exactly the problem that I was describing, that as you get over 40 knots, you start to cavitate. So you really hit this wall. However much power you throw at it through the sails, you just can't get over that wall, because as you go faster and faster into the cavitation regime, the drag just increases and increases and increases. So with a conventional foiling boat, or any kind of foil generating lift, and in the case of sail rocket, it's generating lift in the horizontal direction, side force, you just can't get past that point. So to overcome that, the sail rocket guys looked at a completely different type of foil, which was it's called base ventilated foil. So that's when you completely accept that you're going to go beyond the cavitation regime and learn to love the environment you're now in. So instead of trying to fight against it, you embrace it, and you actually, I mean, what happens with cavitation is you get such low pressure on one side of the foil that the water effectively boils. Then if that low pressure finds a path up to the surface of the water, then the air effectively sucks down one side of the foil. So instead of having water going slowly on one side and water going fast on the other, you actually have water on one side of the foil and air on the other side of the foil, and the whole other side of the foil is ventilated. And once you can get into that regime, your design of foils is completely different. So the kind of shape of foil looks nothing like an aircraft airfoil, more like a triangular wedge. And that's what the guys at Sail Rocket did so well. In terms of whether that's applicable to us, I think it could be. The trouble is we've got to go upwind and downwind, and we've got to take off. We've got to do pre-starts. Paul had a real struggle accelerating up to those speeds, and he probably wouldn't be much good at in sort of 8 knots going upwind, but that didn't matter because he just had to get up to speed over whatever length it took him, and then be very, very fast over 500 meters. I mean, you're looking forward, America's Cup speeds have come on so much over the last 2 decades. If we are going to go much faster than we do at the moment, then for sure that would be the only way I know of that you could achieve that. But you'd have to work out a way of getting to those speeds, and whether that would be you have one foil for accelerating and then somehow you can switch to a ventilating foil, or I don't know, but that would be the way you'd have to do it.
Right. Okay.
And I think the big question is, do we want to go much faster? It starts to get to a point, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to convince the sailors that they don't want to go faster. Yeah, I mean, there's not many sailors in America's Cup now who would like to go back to IACC yachts.
I know.
I think, yeah, it's just become
so exciting about one of those decelerating things, and concussions start to become an issue, not just in a crash, but in just big decelerations. So
yeah, so Chris, just thinking of the other guys, just double checking whether Horatio and Martin are able to hear us at all. Are they on with us, or have they gone back and had a coffee or gone to bed?
They are on and unmuted. Sorry, general public. And I don't know. I think they've been trying in and out of the audio.
Okay, Martin, can you hear me at all?
So Martin can hear us. Yeah, for sure.
Whether he can answer us is a
yeah,
a different thing. So it's a bit like putting candy in front of a child, I suppose. But I was just thinking, Martin, you might remember me asking you the question, because looking out here on Lake Garda and looking at the advancement of foiling, which for me, with the old man in the room, is so fantastically exciting. I think just as a general thing, Dan and Horatio, seeing the boats around here, you're not seeing people here in keel boats, displacement boats. Everything out in this lake at the minute is foiling. And I was thinking, right, so the earliest question that I had, Dan, about foiling and the trickle down or the impact within the sport of sailing. And I've heard a lot of criticism. I'm a regular attendee of Sailing Illustrated, and hear some of the fairly perhaps views that would normally be held by people of my sort of vintage. But just thinking back to Martin, and we were sitting in Bermuda, I don't know if he remembers it, and I was asking him about the GC32 and whether today, with what he knows, whether he would design the GC32 the same as he did when he created that boat. And I just wonder whether if Martin is able to respond, then great. If not, then we'll take it another time. But whether Martin would, with all that he's been learning, taking forward to the AC75, whether there are lessons that he's been learning that he would apply to a different GC32.
Cool. Martin, if you heard that, just give us a little typed answer in terms of it. Would you design the GC32 any differently now with what you know, but now going through the cup cycle as well, even more so? And oh, he did hear that. Perfect. So the general audience, you guys can't see this chat, but we're going to have him type that through. And
if he could use Morse code, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, no, here we go. So Martin says, I would probably focus more on upwind foiling, which, of course, the 2013 America's Cup campaigns were trying to catch up on. And he said, but I think I won't change the overall concept completely,
right.
which also makes sense. It seems like and I wonder why that is, Martin. Is it that downwind, for a lot of different foiling with the angles of attack, downwind foiling is an easier thing and less aero drag? The purpose of the boat was to create a simple boat, which is what he said about the GC32, which was without hydraulics, which is important to understand too. That was like the first design to be production, high level racing catamaran foiler. And we all looked at those boats, the way they performed. It was a little wild. But we figured the sailors would have to learn how to control them. Martin, do you think that that's kind of the as far as the sailor's ability versus like in the AC 75 or even the last round of America's Cup catamarans, do you think you like the idea of having the sailors control the flight more so than automatic? Let's see. Yeah, and Martin says an AC 75 is a very different beast. But we get to that point, and Dan, maybe you can answer this too, both Martin, Horatio, and Dan. Is there a certain point where you just can't have, is it just size where the crew just can't handle managing the mechanics of flight and sail control just on their own? Like, what's the limit?
By on your own, you mean without hydraulics?
Without hydraulics and, without
an iPad in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. Controlling flight, more based on eye and feel.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the flight control on an AC-75 is more manual than it is on a Moth. A Moth has a wand.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a good point.
We specifically didn't allow that in the rule for the AC-75 because, I mean, ultimately, if we hadn't had any rules, you probably would have had autopilots throughout. You'd have had autopilots controlling the wing or the mainsail, the foil, the rudder, and ultimately the steering wheel. But it pretty quickly stopped being a sport, stopped being if there's no sailors involved, then I think it'd lose its interest pretty quickly. So we went to quite a lot of lengths in the rule to stop that kind of automation, and it's actually quite difficult to do because it's quite hard to sort of think of any way in which you could get around that and write that in words. But we went further than we did with the AC50s. So I mean, I think it's fairly well known now that the Team New Zealand yacht in Bermuda, although you're not allowed a closed loop autopilot, there's nothing prohibiting you telling the foil trimmer what to do or giving guidance. So in some parts of the racing, we would have a screen with an arrow on it, and the foil trimmer just had to follow the arrow. And he wasn't actually that keen on spending another 3 years staring at a screen. So this time it is completely manual. He's having to use his feel of what's going on to control the foil and look outside the boat. So it is taking it a little bit back towards sailing.
Cool. And that's in combination with flaps now, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so I hope you don't mind me pursuing this line of thoughts here, Chris, but I'm just thinking about 9 years ago today, I was in Plymouth watching the AC45s pooning around Plymouth Sound, and next year those AC50s, I guess they were, Dan will be there as the Sail GP, this time on foils, and we're seeing this progress, haven't we? So when we were in San Francisco, we saw the move of what were regular catamarans became foiling boats, and I'm thinking that the way that the world of sailing has been trying to learn about foiling, and then looking at the discussions we're having at the minute and throughout the world of sailing and in world sailing about things like the NACRA 17, and whether we're going to foiling a little bit too soon for a boat like that. Is that the right thing to do? Should we be looking at retrofitting designs, or should we be going back to the Martin question really about the GC32, something like the NACRA, which if I understand it correctly was a retrofitted foiling package to a small 17-foot boat or whatever it is. Where do you think that we should be with that? Should we be taking the super skill set of all you guys here and re-looking at something for an Olympic class that's different to that NACRA?
Is that a question for me? Or,
all three of you. If Horatio and Martin could type away if they can't speak, and perhaps we'll get perhaps you'll have one view across the three of you, or maybe it'd be great if you had different views, because we could then start to learn some more.
Well, and really quick, Dan, before you say that, and this ties into Martin's answer before of what he would do differently now from the information that you guys have going through these cup cycles, learning about foiling, a more purpose-built, smaller foiler for the Olympics or other classes. And Martin said, what he'd learned after the GC32, I probably would install a mechanical wand similar to a moth in combination with T-foils that provide a big performance gain. I could also envisage an electronic flight control system, but probably without hydraulics, but purely electric. I think the NACRA concept works reasonably well, but today we could design a much faster boat. So, Dan, how about you in terms of purpose-built stuff?
I mean, I think the NACRA is a really cool boat, and it's actually been quite suited to having foils on it. I mean, the design space is evolving very quickly. So I think, just as in America's Cup, everyone's second boat will be a lot quicker than their first, I think. If we were designing a NACRA 17 today, then I'm sure Raleigh and Melvin could design a Mark II that was better. But I think it's still got some life in it, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Cool. And so we have just a couple more minutes left, and let's just really quickly, Dan and Martin and Horatio. Martin still says a real drawback of the NACRA is that it loses a lot of riding moment, and therefore upwind performance is not so great. Okay, and that goes back to what you were saying, Dan, in terms of what we're learning about purpose-built versus retrofitted and and that. So let's talk about the trickle down. Obviously, there's developments in foil technology in large boats, and also the sails. I mean, I wasn't a big proponent personally of the two-skinned mainsail, but between all the developments in the AC75, where do you see the, I know we keep using the term, but it's the best term, trickle down into the to the luxury and regular sailing market, production sailing market?
Yeah, I think the luxury market, probably there's quite a lot of way to go for what we're doing with the AC75 to trickle down to that. I think sort of in the market in between, which is sports boats and sort of racing dinghies or smaller racing yachts. I think there's definitely scope for trickle down there. Probably, I mean, the actual concept of the AC75, it could certainly be done at a smaller scale. Well, we've seen it's been done at a smaller scale with every team's test boat, and although we didn't launch with a test boat to start with, the 38-footer that we've done a lot of our development on is a really, really cool boat, and something like that could easily become a class in its own right. And I think sailors would love that. It's certainly our sailors did, and it's so much fun to sail. So yeah, that would be great to see that sort of class take off. And the double skin mainsail, I think, yeah, well, time will tell. It's had a lot of challenges, but I think all teams have moved on a long way from where we were 2 years ago, sort of dreaming about it. And it's definitely a more efficient sail than a single skin sail can be.
Cool. Go ahead, Andrew.
Chris, I'm thinking trickle down. I'm also then thinking about trickle up. And I was inspired yesterday afternoon listening to Laura Merriman talking about the project she's working on for Valnius Wilhelmsen, I think it is, on putting this into a ship to be a car carrier. And I wondered whether you're seeing, or whether people are tapping you on the shoulders yet to see how you can find industrial applications of that wing foil technology that would be able to have a beneficial impact on society and on the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see more commercial ships using wind power, and I think there's some logistical difficulties, like launching a kite off a container ship is difficult because of the size of it, but I hope it will come, that it becomes more widespread. I mean, there's quite a few people trying to do that. I think in terms of foiling, it doesn't really scale that well to a container ship. The size of the foils would need to be really huge to have any reasonable aspect ratio, and then the practicalities of both the structural design of how you would support something so big, because generally as you scale a yacht up, the structure actually gets harder. So most things scale pretty well. You can sort of scale length by length and area by length squared, and the mass by length to the power of 3. But when you do that in the structures world, it gets harder pretty quickly. And to actually physically build a foil that would support a container ship with enough span for it to be remotely efficient would be very, very difficult. Not to mention how you would ever get anywhere near a dock with a huge foil sticking outside. So I think at the big end, wind power is probably a more likely trickle up than foils.
And let's see, I'm going to share what Martin says, and then we have to wrap up. Martin Fisher says, I think the AC-75 is extremely complex, and I'm not sure it will trickle down as it is, but we learn a lot on control systems that can trickle down, I think. Another area in design is design methods, but that would be a trickle down to naval architects. The trickle down to the great public would then be a second stage. For cargo ships, foiling does not make sense, I think. Foiling makes only sense if you want to go fast and with a relatively light and reasonably small vessel. I agree on the trickle up on wind power. So, but I think rigid sails make more sense for industrial applications.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. That makes sense to me too. So we're going to wrap this up. Dan and Martin, I'll throw the last question out to you. We're talking about you guys are working really hard in front of computer screens a lot and videos. Are you getting out on the water yourself? Or are you getting to do some of your own sailing? What are you up to?
I'm out on the water plenty in the chase boat, following the 75 around. But no, I'm getting really, I do have a yacht, but it's getting really good value out of the marina fees at the moment, not leaving the dock anytime. So yeah, hopefully after the middle of March when the cup's over, get some use out of it.
What's the yacht?
It's a Townsend 38.
It's
a Kiwi design. It's a classic triple skin carry yacht.
Cool. And what's the name?
Belle Ami. I didn't name it. That's what it was called. I don't know why it's got a French name for a Kiwi boat, but that's how it is. Cool.
And Martin says, from time to time, I am taking out my flying Phantom, but it's rare. Makes sense, right? Well, Andrew, Bruno, if you guys are okay, we'll wrap this up. It's funny that we're talking about trickle down. Our next guest is going to be Tommy Gonzalez with the Eagle Class 53, which is a cruising foiling catamaran. And so, I think certainly as a result of Dan's work over the last years with the America's Cup and other designers, and we're also going to be talking tomorrow to Artemis Technologies and Ian Percy about some of the commercial applications of what people have learned through the simulation, hydrofoils and wings. So does everyone feel good right now?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Dan, thank you so much. Horacio, I'm really sorry, but we're going to try to do a pre-recorded interview with him and Martin as well. We'll find those guys maybe on a different platform. So thank you very much, everyone. We're going to get ready for Tommy Gonzalez and the Eagle Class 53 update, which is a boat that's just learning how to fly soon. And we'll keep going. Dan, thank you so much. Good luck with all your training.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Bruno, Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you. We're out.